Greetings, it's Reed Young for transformpoker.com, and we are checking out some 6 max game, and we got a heads up game going. Both of them are lower mid stakes, so we've got a 1-2 game and a 100 no limit heads up game going on. When we last left off, part 1 here, I made a little bit of a move on a turn and moved all in on this dude after he double barreled me in a re-raised pot, and he ended up folding, which was sweet because it's a decent sized hand, and I didn't even have to make a straight, so that was good. On the left side, I've been kind of messing this guy up. He's been making some face-up plays, and I'm just doing the best I can to realize my equity in a lot of spots against his odd bet sizes, so this is a great example of it happening with this 3-9. I make a small flop raise, and he calls, and then once the turn is actually so good for my range, which I would do that with, I opt to go ahead and just check it back and try to get to showdown against like ace high and maybe call some rivers if he bets, because I expect him to turn some of those into a bluff and try to represent the flush. When he bets the river, there's not too much value in raising, so I just decide to call, because if I raise, really the only thing I'm hoping for him to bet call with is a flush, or I guess a random 6 or something like pocket 7s, but none of those really make sense. So I think he has to just bet call a flush, and I just didn't think he would do that often. But on the other hand, it does kind of look odd that I would be value raising a 3, so some people might call, and also probably most people aren't checking back trip kings on the turn there. So a value raise might have worked, but I think I actually said this in the last video that at this point in the match it was fairly early, because I don't think there's a lot of value in the raise, and because it's such an odd spot, I kind of prefer the call. Just because I don't think I'm making much, like I said, from the raise, but I do get to figure out what he's thinking, and that's pretty valuable at the beginning of a heads-up match. So now I kind of know he's like a goofier, like trying to get me to spaz out sort of player, and I can really use that against him for the rest of the match. So that's a lot more valuable, I think, than those like $3 I might have made, like 10% of the time, I would say. So 30 cents versus figuring out his thought process, pretty easy choice there. So on the right side, typically after you win a pretty big pot against a player and you're out of position, a lot of people react differently. So I'm kind of wary of this guy going for a few more re-raises than normal. Some people don't do it. Some, I would say, are definitely prone just to going crazy here. On the left, I have ace-4 offsuit, and I get 3-bet. I think this is the first time he 3-bet, and now I think calling here is fine. I'm not getting that great of odds pre-flop, and then we're not full stacked either because he didn't rebuy. So I just went ahead and 4-bet, and I made a pretty big 4-bet because I wanted him to be like, oh, this dude's for real, instead of making something cute like 15. Not a huge difference, but I think the difference in folding equity is pretty big here. And now he's definitely in a shove or fold spot, whereas if I made it like 14 or 15, I think he's going to be flatting with a lot of playable hands like Queen 10 or even like Ace 10 suited, Ace Jack, which I really don't want because I have Ace 4 offsuit. So this play is more designed to take advantage of the fact that I have a blocker to a lot of the hands that he would be 5-bet shoving all in with, namely those strong Ace-X hands or pocket aces. So when you have a polarized 4-betting range, I think a larger size works out a little bit in your favor just because you discourage the flatting out of position. That said, usually heads up, you probably want to 4-bet more playable hands in general because you can expect ranges to be wider, and 4-bet calling is more of a common occurrence than it is in a different position in 6 max play. So that's a big difference in heads up and 6 max. So you guys can play around with some different math there and then see what hands are good to 4-bet and call. You can see my bankroll on Bovada is not exactly robusto here, so hopefully things go well. Pocket nines from the small blind Sometimes I'll be 3-betting the cutoff depending on the player. Here, actually, I have a very clear idea of what I want to do. Because 3-betting the cutoff, especially a little deeper than 100 big blinds, we're 130 big blinds deep, um, flatting a 4-bet out of position with nines kind of sucks just because it's very difficult to play. I mean, there's almost certainly one or even two overcards on the board, and you're kind of forced to check call some pretty huge bets if you want to see a showdown a lot of the time. And against a good player, I mean, your hand is just not going to do very well. And against an unknown, I just have no idea really how to get value from it in that situation. And then the alternative when facing a 4-bet would be to 5-bet shove. That's going to be not good because he has to be 4-bet bluffing me a ridiculous amount of the time for a 5-bet shove to be profitable with the nines, or doing something stupid like 4-betting and calling off with like sevens. Don't see that happening. So the real value I think though in this hand is what I was saying before. This guy in the big blind, I think he has a very good chance of just being kind of frustrated with getting owned or feeling owned after that 10-8 shove on the turn. So I expect him to go for a squeeze a bit too often here, and nines are really anyway a great hand to back raise shove. It's one of the strongest hands that we just flatting preflop here, and that means it's going to be one of the strongest hands with which I can back raise all in. Of course, ignoring the occasional slow play with aces or something like that, but you know, I'm not always going to have a discounted slow played aces type of hand. So, and he actually does squeeze, so I feel fancy. And then I'm just gonna go with the plan here and put it in. The left side hand is actually pretty sick too. I turn a diamond draw, and I think I can also represent King Jack, which he really does not have very often. And then, yeah, somehow on the right I want to flip. That was pretty confusing for me. But awesome, so I'm getting a little bit of momentum there on the right table. Just busting up this guy really good. So I think if he's going to stick around, very likely he goes on tilt. It does some sort of, you know, crazy maneuver when he probably shouldn't be. A lot of people who 12 table or something like that, you want to be careful not to over apply that dynamic to them. But because there's really only a few 1-2 games running on this website, I know that he is very much paying attention to what's going on this table. So I expect the dynamic to be, you know, kind of fulfilled in that way, and it likely to be that he just makes some sort of spewing move in the near future, if he sticks around, that is. On the left side, like I was saying, I have a diamond draw, which is probably not a ton of equity once I get called on the turn, but it allows me to check back some diamond rivers, maybe go for some thinner value bets, you know, if it's like the king of diamonds or something like that. But I can probably check back some rivers and be pretty comfortable with that, as opposed to trying to bluff a diamond river, because I think I'm going to take it down with just a baby flush enough of the time. On the turn, I think it's a bit wide of a semi-bluff, but my plan is, because I'm bluffing the turn so widely here, that I can work in some overbets on the river. And another good part of this whole plan with 2-8 here is that I don't expect him to check call many flush draws on an ace-high flop. And that might be incorrect, but in general, at 100 no limit, my experience, and especially heads up, and especially in an aggressive match, a lot of players just don't check call their draws very often. And that's, of course, a mistake, but it's kind of a general assumption that I'm making about how the players play. And I think it's going to help a little bit with this hand, but, you know, if he called me with, like, you know, 4-6 of diamonds here, I would not be that surprised, but that's only a few combinations, and I'm definitely banking on the fact that I can actually probably value bet like ace-10 or better here and do well enough by shoving. So that's pretty thin. Typically on the river, you want to have more than one bet size, because you can't really, I can't like 3x pot my entire range here and expect to get value from it. But I can expect to bet, you know, say half pot and get value from some hands that I wouldn't get if I 3x pot those same hands. So if you think about a hand like ace jack, if I bet $12, he's probably going to call me with like ace 6 anyway. Like he just doesn't care. Getting 3 to 1, maybe I have a diamond draw or like a king or a jack that has decided to barrel on the turn. Whatever, pot odds, top pair, yada yada, he's going to just call me down. So typically you want to have at least 2 bet sizes is where I'm going with that. And what you want to do is make sure that your weaker bet size, the half pot in this case, also contains some of your nutted combinations. So you don't want to go too wild, just only overbetting the nuts and air, and then betting, your decent hands for a half pot, because then you're very susceptible to river check raises. Now, of course, if your opponent's never check raising the river, none of that matters. So you can kind of size up your opponent and then make your strategy accordingly, but that's kind of the blueprint for what you want to do there. And then actually he starts going into the tank, which is awesome because now I know I've put him into a gross spot. And I do expect to have a lot of air here, of course, but with ace 10 plus, that means I can have ace 10, pocket queens, king jack, any flush, all sorts of stuff. And in comparison to my air, I think it's a very close spot for him actually. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think about all these plays I've been making in the comments section, and I will see you guys for part 3. And if you guys could share this video with a poker playing buddy of yours, I would definitely appreciate it.